Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Berger, and I'm the Theater Operations and Events Manager at Film Forum, an independent nonprofit four-screen cinema in Manhattan's West Village, now in its 51st year. I'm speaking to you all live from our offices in Soho. This is yet another virtual event we are hosting until we can return to live events at the theater. So first and foremost, we wish you all health and happiness at this time. Today's discussion is on There Is No Evil, a four-part drama by Mohammad Rasoulof that explores the ethical implications of the death penalty, especially as it's exercised in an authoritarian regime. The film was shot in secret and smuggled out of Iran. Eric Kohn in IndieWire calls it a brilliant anthology and a riveting thriller that maintains an enthralling rhythm with an organic visual approach that keeps changing throughout. There Is No Evil had its world premiere in 2020 at the Berlin Film Festival, where it won the Golden Bear, the festival's top honor. It was in Berlin where our premieres programmer Mike Maggiore saw the film and booked it for Film Forum. You can watch There Is No Evil on our virtual cinema platform at filmforum.org or come to our theater on West Houston Street and see it on the big screen. I'd like to now welcome Film Forum's Deputy Director, Sonia Chung, to say a few words and introduce our guest moderator for this event. Sonia?
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to our guests, and thank you to all of you who are watching this now. We are delighted, thrilled, and honored to be showing this film, There Is No Evil, this powerful, stunning film, and really grateful and honored to have the filmmaker with us. Joe will be doing a more extensive introduction of the filmmaker, Mohammad Rasoulof, in a moment, but I'd like to just say that we are also delighted to be co-presenting and collaborating this conversation with the Asian American Writers Workshop, an organization that is near and dear to my heart. This is our second collaboration, and hopefully there will be more to come. Jafreen Uddin is the executive director of the Asian American Writers Workshop since January 2020, a heck of a time to step into a leadership position. She is also the first woman to lead that organization since its founding in 1991. She came to the workshop from Penn America, and also before that from NYU's Stern School of Business. And before that, also at NYU, the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU's School of Law, where she helped create the infrastructure for the public programming there. Jafreen received her BA in political economics from Barnard College and her MA in global history from NYU's Graduate School of Arts and Science. Jafreen, thank you so much for moderating this conversation for us.
Thank you, Sonia, for having me. Honored to be here.
Thank you, Jafreen. We are thrilled to welcome our guest today, Mohammad Rasoulof. Mohammad is an independent director, writer, and producer from Iran. Mohammad is an award-winning filmmaker. He was honored as Best Director in a Certain Regard for his film Goodbye at the Cannes Film Festival in 2011. At the 2017 Cannes Film Festival, he won the main prize, again in A Certain Regard, for A Man of Integrity. Upon returning to Iran in September of 2017, he was accused of, quote, endangering national security and, quote, spreading propaganda against the Islamic government. He was sentenced to 1 year imprisonment and has been prohibited from membership in any political or social organization. All of these limitations have not stopped Mohammad from working, and we are thrilled to discuss today his newest feature, There Is No Evil. Mohammad is joined by translator Massoumeh Lahidji. Massoumeh will translate consecutively, so she will speak after Mohammad speaks. Sonia and I will say goodbye, and we'll see you all in about 45 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Sonia. I want to thank everybody at Film Forum for hosting this. Thank you to everybody tuning in. And Mohammad, thank you. I'm just so honored to be in conversation today. I want to start, this is such an important film that really powerfully explores the tension between a system and the people that either willingly or unwillingly make that system possible. And I remember reading that it was a personal moment in your own life that really motivated you to make this film. So, for our audience who might not be familiar with your story and your work, can you share a little bit about your personal history, maybe starting with your 2017 imprisonment and the moment afterwards that really inspired you to make this movie?
من خیلی خوشحالم که توی این گفتگو شرکت میکنم و اگه بخوام یه مقدار درباره خودم توضیح بدم، میشه گفت که برای سالهای زیادی 8 فیلم ساختم و برای سالهای زیادی توی سینما کار کردم. خیلی پیچیده است اگه بخوام بگم چطور توی یه مواجهه خیلی دشوار با ساختار سانسور توی سینما ایران قرار گرفتم و در واقع اونجا کاملا به این نتیجه رسیدم که از بیان حقیقت در رویی با سیستم سانسور کاملا عاجز بودم، برای اینکه میشه گفت این ساختاری که توی ایران توی قدرت حاکم هست یک ساختار ناشنواست که در واقع فقط آن چیزی که کمک میکنه به برقراری حاکمیت و قدرت براش مهمه و مطلقاً به خواست مردم و افکار عمومی و نیازهای جامعه اهمیتی نمیده. این شد که من به مرور زمان توی مواجهه با ساختار سانسور قرار گرفتم و طبیعتاً در یک زمینه استبدادی این مواجهه به یک رودررویی سیاسی منتهی شد و در نهایت امروز من با چند تا حکم قضایی، چند تا حکم زندان و ممنوعیت خروج از کشور و چیزهای مختلفی روبرو هستم که واقعا نمیفهمم. یه آدم فرهنگی و یه کسی که روبرو شدنش با سیاست جنبه فرهنگی داره و در واقع میشه گفت من کاملا مواجهم با مسائل سیاسی، مواجهه فرهنگی برای این چی باید تو این سیستم در نهایت یا نتونم از کشور خارجم و اجازه کار ندارم. به هر حال هیچ کدوم از اینا باعث نمیشه که من چیزی که بر خودم متصور هستم این که درباره شرایطی که درش زندگی میکنم و درباره موقعیتی که میشناسم از زندگی توی ایران قصه تعریف کنم و فیلم هامو بسازم.
I am delighted to take part in this conversation with you. Thank you for having me. Well, it's quite hard for me to try and tell the story of how it all started. I've been involved in filmmaking for years now, and I've made 8 feature films. But then at some point I was confronted with a very clear resistance of the censorship system. And I realized that there was no way out of conflict as this structure of censorship is totally deaf and has no sensitivity to the needs and the public opinion and the needs of the population, and their only concern is just to take control. And in this system, any expression of truth was made impossible. So for me, I realized that if I wanted to go on making films, I had to make this confrontation more explicit, and it became, whether I wanted it or not, a political confrontation, whereas it was not my aim to begin with. I'm a person who's involved in culture and in art. And for some reason, just this need of expressing the truth of the society in which I live, find no other way of existing than getting into this political standpoint and this political conflict. So that's the reason why I was sentenced with jail, and I have no right to pursue my activity or to leave the country. That might sound quite absurd, because once again, all I was meaning to do was to make films and to express the truth of my environment, of my society. And still, in spite of all these sentences and all these restrictions, I still fight for the same ambition that I've always had, which is to go on making films.
There was a pragmatic and logistical reason that you needed to utilize the structure in this film of vignettes over like a full-length feature film. But as a viewer, it felt really just such a natural and fitting way to tell these stories. So in actually putting the film together, was there anything about the structure that surprised you or that you didn't anticipate? And I'd love to hear how much the structure informed how you thought about the narrative, if it did, or vice versa.
واقعیت اینه که تو شرایطی که من کار میکنم نه فقط خود اون چیزی که اطرافم میبینم بخش مهمی از مواد اولیه‌ای که باش کار میکنم، بلکه اون محدودیت‌هایی هم که باش روبرو هستم همیشه قسمتی از مواجهه من با سینما بوده. یعنی یه قسمت بزرگی از انرژی من همیشه صرف پیدا کردن راه حلایی شده که بتونم بدون چشمای حکومت و بدون نگاه دستگاه‌های امنیتی یه فیلم بسازم. این خیلی پیچیده است برای اینکه به نظر میرسه نشدنیه وقتی که سیستم قدرت تا این اندازه ابزار و امکانات داره، ولی به نظر من گاهی اوقات خیلی ساده تر از اون چیزیه که آدم فکر میکنه. فقط کافیه که این جرأت و این انتخاب رو داشته باشه که بخواد بیرون از این ساختارهایی که تعریف شده و بهش تحمیل شده کار کنه. بنابراین اگه بخوام جواب دقیق به سوال شما بدم، باید بگم که خب اول اینجوری شروع شد که من فکر میکردم که ساختن یه فیلم بلند سینمایی به خاطر تعداد روزای زیاد فیلم برداری خیلی خطرناکه دیگه و من باید مواظب باشم که یه جوری این کار رو انجام بدم که واقعا ریسک دستگیری و مشکلات بدون اجازه کار کردن کاملا بیاد پایین. بنابراین فکر کردم بهترین راه اینه که یه جوری روزای فیلم برداری رو کم کنم و بعد روزای فیلم برداری رو از نگاه مرکز شهر خارج کنم، برم بیرون در واقع شهر باشم. اینا چیزایی بود که قبلا هم پیش اومده بود، تو فیلم‌های قبلی هم در نظر گرفته بودم که یه جوری از این راه و روش‌ها استفاده کنم برای اینکه بتونم از زیر نگاه یه خود بیام بیرون. ولی در نهایت وقتی که به داستان فکر کردم و تو موقعیت‌های شخصی پیش اومد که این داستان‌ها تو من جوونه زد و یهو زنده شد، هر بار که یه داستان پیش می اومد اون داستان منو یه جوری هدایت میکرد به سمت داستان بعدی، یا یه اتفاقی میافتاد که طی 2 سال همه اینا کنار هم قرار گرفت. و در واقع میشه گفت این مثل اینه که شما یه مزرعه دارید و میخواید یه محصولی رو تولید بکنید، علاوه بر اینکه یه مقدار آب دارید همیشه چشمتون با آسمون هست که یه مقدار هم بارون بیاد، شانس هم بهتون کمک کنه و همه این چیزا کنار هم دیگه. و به نظر میاد منم به اندازه کافی آدم خوش شانسی هستم برای اینکه بتونم این نتیجه رو بگیرم.
Well, it's obvious that from the beginning, as I said, I'm really inspired and influenced by my environment and the society I live in. But I've also been used to be inspired or to focus my energy on the restrictions that I have and on the actual ways of making films that are given to me. And so it's, of course, if you're not submitted to this kind of authoritarian regime, maybe it's trying to imagine, but it's really part of your way of the energy that you put in your work is also focused on the way of on how you should try and avoid all these obstacles and to try and find ways of escaping them. And that might sound impossible even because the system and the intelligence service is so powerful, is so gifted, has so many means that you might think that it's impossible to escape from them. but it's also a matter of determination and boldness. If you're really determined to do it, and if you have the courage and the patience to do it, there are always ways. So you just integrate these ways in the way you create your story. And so quite soon I realized that now that there were all this pressure on me, I should avoid a feature film, because a feature film means a long period of shooting, many days of shooting, and I should try and run away from the big city, go in the countryside, and maybe break it into short films. So these were the first two criteria that came from these restrictions that I had. And then once that I had more or less this structure in mind, whenever I came up with one story, quite naturally and organically, it led me to the other story. And so it's been in a span of 2 years, they came together. It became like a puzzle that finally came together, and it became this complex narrative that leads from one story to the other. So this is something that you just integrate in your creative process once that you have to do with the system, and finally that's how the film was structured.
So moving to the stories themselves, one thing that I found a common thread through all of them, and particularly heart-wrenching, was that there's no simple moral code or judgment. The line between right and wrong, much like in real life, was so blurry. Why was that important to you as a filmmaker to explore this particular issue, the death penalty in Iran, as a quandary with really no easy answers?
وقتی که برای ساختن این فیلم به ایده مرکزی فکر می‌کردم، اولین موضوعی که خیلی بزرگ توی ذهن من مطرح بود، پرداختن به مسئولیت فردی توی یه زمینه استبدادی بود. یعنی بزرگترین سوالی که از خودم داشتم این بود که وقتی توی این شرایط زندگی میکنی و یک تصمیماتی خارج از اراده تو به تو تحمیل میشه، مواجهت با این تصمیمات چیه؟ موضوع اصلی برای من این بود. وقتی که به این فکر کردم که باید درباره این مفهوم یک داستان عینی در واقع ساخته بشه، دوست داشتم اونجا تاثیر این تصمیماتی رو که یه فرد توی این سیستم میگیره و ممکنه زندگی دیگرون رو کاملا از بین ببره فکر میکردم، و طبیعتاً به نظرم رسید که مواجهه یک مسئول اعدام با شغل خودش میتونه بهترین داستانی باشه که این موقعیت مسئولیت فردی و اهمیتی که این تصمیم‌های فردی توی ارتباط با موقعیت توی جامعه استبدادی داره رو اونجا ببینم و روایت کنم. بنابراین میشه گفت که موضوع اصلی برای من پرداختن به مسئولیت فردی هست.
When I started thinking about this last feature film of mine, the main issue, really, what was at the heart of my reflection and my desire to make a new film, was the question of personal responsibility, and especially in when you live under a regime that it's not democratic, when you have to face a dictatorship and some decisions are made for you that you don't agree with, but you still have to undergo them and you have to apply them, how you deal with this conscious issue, and how you how far can you go in taking your personal responsibility in this kind of oppressive system. And so once that I knew that would be the main point, the question was, what would be the stake of this responsibility that individuals can take in this kind of states? If what would be the consequences of the decisions that they had to make. And it seemed quite obvious to me that the most important stake was the vital one. So if a person is an executioner in an oppressive regime, and his role is to take the life away from the citizens of his country, then that's really the central point in which this question of personal responsibility is obvious, and its moral and personal stakes are obvious. So that's how I came up with the issue of death penalty. That wasn't my starting point, but what allowed me to dedicate really my reflection on this issue of personal responsibility.
So in your vision of the film, and maybe even when you were filming or in production, how did the pandemic and, you know, the global pandemic, everybody going in isolation, how did that impact your vision and or your perspective, if not just the film, even culture more broadly, and the issues that you were trying to bring up in the film? Did the pandemic have an effect on what you were doing and thinking at the time?
من میدونم که موضوع کووید 19 توی همه جای دنیا وضعیت سینما رو تحت تاثیر قرار داد و به هر حال خیلی از فستیوال‌ها برگزار نشدن یا آنلاین برگزار شدن و با این وجود نمایش شیطان وجود ندارد ظاهرا خوب پیش رفت. در بعضی از کشورها هنوز انجام نشده و مدام عقب میفته، ولی بعضی جاها این شانس رو داشتیم که فیلم نمایش عمومی داشت یا توی VOD توی شبکه‌های در واقع اینترنتی به نمایش در اومد. ولی فکر میکنم که مثل خیلی از فیلم‌های دیگه این قربانی شرایط موجود توی کووید 19 شد و امیدوارم که اکران عمومیش توی امریکا خوب پیش بره الان که شروع شده.
So, of course, I'm aware that the pandemic had a great impact on the situation of cinema, on the industry, and on the releases of films, on all aspects of the film industry through the world. But for the case of my film, I must say that as the film was already shot and screened just before the pandemic, the impact was, in a way, limited, because the film was released in some countries, in some others the theatrical release was postponed. In some places it went directly on VOD or online, so it has started being seen, and of course it's a pleasure to be able now to take part in talks and to really see the film coming up. So like many other films, of course my film was also a victim, an indirect victim of the pandemic, and I do hope that now it will have a very good release in the States, and it's going to have quite a normal life.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about communities living in authoritarian regimes. And when I think about communities across the world living under any form of systemic oppression, whether it's, you know, the Black and Brown communities dealing with law enforcement in the United States, or the Palestinian communities in the Middle East dealing with the Israeli occupation, or the Iranian people, as you described, when their stories are described in the media, it often is done in a way that flattens their struggles, and the humanity of the people most oppressed is often kind of erased by traditional media narratives. So I'm just curious what role you think the art and artists have in telling these stories of marginalized communities.
من طبیعتاً میتونم درباره اون چیزی که خودم راجع به خودم تصمیم گرفتم توضیح بدم. من فکر میکنم که به عنوان یه انسانی که توی یک شرایط مخصوصی و یه موقعیتی توی مرز محدود شده‌ای به اسم ایران زندگی میکنم، میتونم قسمت واقعی زندگی باشم، بازتاب واقعی زندگی باشم توی اثرم. انتخاب من اینه که کار من بازتاب اون چیزی باشه که توی محیط اطرافم میبینم و توی زندگی میبینم. بنابراین فکر میکنم که این شکل بازتاب کمک میکنه به یک نگاه فرهنگی و به یک میشه گفت آگاهی بخشی یا همین اندازه که چه درباره واقعیتی که داره رخ میده با جزئیات حرف زد، فکر میکنم یه کار طبیعتاً در این اما من فکر نمی کنم که همه هنرمند تا این اندازه روی این مسائل وایستن و خیلی یعنی همه با هم دست به این کار بزنن. من فکر میکنم این یه رابطه‌ایه که آدم انتخاب میکنه با خودش داشته باشه و با هنر داشته باشه. بنابراین فکر میکنم که نمیتونم هیچ توصیه‌ای به کسی داشته باشم در این خصوص، فقط این وضعیتی خودم درش هستم.
Well, I think I can only talk about my own choices and where I stand myself as a filmmaker and as an artist in the society in which I live. So I am actually marginalized in the country where I live, in a position that I have decided to accept and to put up with. And in this position, what really makes sense for me as an artist is to make films and to deliver a reflection of real life as I observe it around me in my films, not to submit my films to some expectations or some standards that come from elsewhere, but only to observe the society as I see it and to try and capture its truth and make a film out of this. This is my own commitment to my craft. But then I think each artist has a different approach and have to make decisions for themselves about what relationship to their own reality, their own surroundings, their own truth they have. I don't have any view that I can try and invite other peoples to.
So continuing this idea of, sharing the reflection of your community with the public, what is one thing you want audiences across the world to know about the Iranian people?
این خیلی سوال پیچیده‌ایه. واقعا فکر میکنم من صلاحیت اینو ندارم که خودم رو جای مردم ایران فرض کنم. این اصلا توی ذهن من نمی گنجه و طبیعتا هیچ ایده‌ای درباره این که مردم ایران چی میخوان به دنیا بگن ندارم. من فقط میدونم ما در ایران نیازمند آزادی و دور شدن از وضعیت غیر انسانی که درش قرار داریم هستیم و ولی این یک صدایی نیست که من به طور عمومی بتونم مدعی بشم که از طرف مردم ایران میگم. من فکر میکنم که پذیرفته شدن اون چیزی که فکر میکنم خیلی به نظرم توی ارتباط با دنیا مهمه، اینه که مردم ایران به عنوان یه عضوی از جامعه جهانی پذیرفته بشن و پیام صلح و دوستی و اون شکلی از ارتباط انسانی که توی روابط بین کشورهای مختلف و مردم کشورهای مختلف هست رو به نظرم خیلی جاش خالیه. اینو کاملا حس میکنم.
I don't feel that I have any legitimacy to really speak in the name of Iranian people or to say how they feel, but it's obvious for me that I can feel living inside this community. I can feel that Iranian people aspire for freedom and to be able to live freely. And I think if there's one aspect that really is missing for Iranians in the relationship with the rest of the world, is being included in the world community and being having to restore this relationship, which is a relationship of peace and harmony and friendship. And in this kind of ideal relationship that we want to have between different communities and different countries and different cultures, Iranians really have this aspiration of being part of this movement and to feel included in this movement. This is something that Iranians really miss, I think.
So to wrap up, I would love to hear really what is your hope for the film, and what are you hoping that audiences across the world, both in and outside of Iran, take away from it?
من فکر میکنم مهمترین تصویری که از شیطان وجود ندارد با من باقی مونده اینه که بیشتر اون تمایل به آزادی و مقاومت در برابر شرایط دشواری که این زمینه استبداد به وجود آورده و بیشتر از اون اینکه نگفتن به قدرت حاکم با همه سختیاش میتونه فوق‌العاده زیبا و تحمل پذیر باشه. مهمترین بخش از داستان برای من مقاومت در برابر ساختار استبدادی هست و اینکه خیلی علاقمندم که این صدا از توی فیلم شنیده بشه که اگرچه نگفتن به قدرت مستبد و جلاد خیلی دشواره و گاهی اوقات میشه گفت خیلی پرهزینه هست، اما همزمان این سختی پر از زیبایی و احساس رضایت میتونه باشه.
I think really the image that remains for myself from this film and where I see hope in it is the fact that all the individuals of all these characters of the film and many of the people who are submitted to oppressive regimes, they still fight and they still resist. It's the act of resistance, the fact of resisting to what oppression tries and impose on you. And although this resistance can be extremely hard and the price to pay for it might be very high, there is still beauty in this in the act of resistance, and it can bring high satisfaction. So this is really what I would like audiences to keep as an image of the film, like the beauty of resistance.
I think especially in today's time, ending on the beauty of resistance is a perfect way to end this conversation and certainly take away from the film. Thank you so much, Mohammad, for being in conversation with me. It's been a real treat. The film is so special, and I hope to those of you watching, if you haven't seen it already, that you will find a way to watch this really important and necessary piece of work. Thank you so much for being with us today.
This conversation, just to wrap up a few words, it reminds me both how important our mission at Film Forum is, which is to show films, provocative and challenging films from around the world, but also what a privilege it is hearing about the constraints, the restrictions, the risk, the stakes of making this film. It's for those of you who have not seen the film yet, it's interesting to see the film, hear this conversation, and then want to go back and see it again, knowing in more detail the circumstances under which it was made. The word vignette, which has this very kind of diminutive tone to it, is so underestimates what that form means for this film. Not only was it made in secret, but now we know that even just trying to get the film to its intended audience is another sort of courageous, surreptitious project. So we're very honored to have it and to have had this conversation. So thank you again. And Jafreen, again, thank you, and the Asian American Writers Workshop.
به سهم خودم خیلی تشکر میکنم از فیلم فورم و خیلی ممنونم که این شرایط رو برای این گفتگو و برای نمایش این فیلم فراهم کردن. فکر میکنم اهمیت خیلی زیادی داره توجه به فیلم‌های مستقل و تأثیری که تو شرایط فعلی توجه به این فیلم‌ها تأثیر میذاره واقعا روی تداوم حیات سینمای مستقل. منم به سهم خودم متشکرم ازش.
I really want to thank the Film Forum. I hope it's not too late for me to say it, that I really appreciate the fact that you've organized this talk and that you support my film and you screen it, because I think that supporting independent cinema nowadays is really necessary more than ever, and it's you who contribute to the survival of independent cinema. So thank you for doing it, and thank you for having me on my film.
Thank you all very much for today. This was fantastic. We also need to thank the North American distributor of There Is No Evil, Kino Lorber, especially Nick Kemp and David Nin, and everyone on the Film Forum staff who helped put this event together, especially Adam Walker and Mike Majori. If you've yet to see There Is No Evil, please visit our website, filmforum.org. Our virtual cinema platform presents a dynamic selection of premieres, including documentaries, world cinema, and American independence, as well as restored classics. You can also visit us on West Houston Street. Tickets are now available for in-person screenings. Stay connected to us through our email newsletter and our social media handle, Film Forum NYC, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We will keep you up to date with additions to our virtual events roster, like the incredible one we saw today. Again, thank you all for being with us today. We wish you health and happiness. Good afternoon.